Welcome to Chronological Fiction, where real-world events meet the power of storytelling. We're here to breathe new life into history's most interesting moments by turning them into unique narratives. Join our community by subscribing, and let's explore the stories that shaped our world.
The vellum was not merely parchment, it was a living skin, a translucent membrane that seemed to pulse with a faint internal light under the flickering tallow of the scriptorium. For 600 years, the Voynich Manuscript had remained a silent titan in the world of cryptology, a linguistic fortress that had repelled the sieges of the greatest minds, from the alchemists of the Holy Roman Empire to the supercomputers of the modern age. It was a book that should not exist, written in a script that followed the mathematical laws of language, but belonged to no known tongue, illustrated with plants that had never bloomed on Earth, and celestial diagrams that mapped stars invisible to the naked eye. In the year 1420, in a hidden chamber beneath the Alps, the man who would be known to history only as the architect dipped his quill not into ink, but into a fermented concoction of copper and gall, beginning the first line of a text that would drive men to madness. The architect didn't write for the eyes of his contemporaries, he wrote for the silence of the void. His hand moved with a fluid, haunting grace, looping characters that looked like a hybrid of Latin, Arabic, and an impossible shorthand of the soul. As he worked, the botanical section grew, drawings of strange, tuberous roots that resembled human nervous systems and flowers with petals like interlocking gears. These were not the observations of a naturalist, but the blueprints of a biomechanical reality. He whispered to the vellum, his voice a dry rasp in the cold air. The root is the anchor, the flower is the antenna, and the word is the frequency. To him, the manuscript was not a book, but a machine made of ink and thought, designed to bridge the gap between the terrestrial and the transcendent. Centuries later, the manuscript surfaced in the court of Rudolf II, the occult-obsessed emperor of Prague. Rudolf, a man who lived in the shadow of his own paranoia, believed the book held the secret of the philosopher's stone. He summoned his finest deciphers, men who had broken the codes of kings and popes. But the Voynich Manuscript mocked them. Each time they thought they had found a pattern, a repeating word like Oladabad or Chedi. The logic would dissolve. It was a linguistic labyrinth where every wall was a mirror. The emperor grew increasingly erratic, staring at the circular astronomical diagrams for days on end, convinced that the dancing figures in the balneological section, the tiny nude women bathing in strange interconnected green pools, were not humans at all, but cellular representations of the divine spark. The mystery deepened when the book passed into the hands of Wilfrid Voynich in 1912. The Polish-American book dealer felt a cold shiver as he opened the cover in an Italian Jesuit college. He saw the fold-out rosettes, a massive 9-panel diagram that seemed to depict a city of towers connected by strange organic pipes, or perhaps a microscopic view of a forgotten organ. Voynich spent his life trying to find the key, but the manuscript remained a locked room with no door. It defied the Zipf's law of linguistics. Its word lengths and frequencies were too perfect to be a random hoax, yet too alien to be a simple substitution cipher. It was a language that had evolved in isolation, perhaps in a mind that perceived time as a physical dimension rather than a linear progression. In the modern era, the digital siege began. Cryptologists from the NSA and Oxford used neural networks to stress test the Voynich alphabet. They found that the text possessed entropy, the measure of information density, similar to natural languages like Hebrew or Latin, but with a strange lack of junk data. There were no crossed-out words, no mistakes, no hesitations. The architect had written 240 pages of an unknown language without a single error, a feat that defied human psychology. Some hypothesized it was a lost dialect of Proto-Romance, others that it was an elaborate shorthand of the Cathars. But the botanical evidence remained the ultimate hurdle. One plant in the manuscript looked like a sunflower, yet its roots were shaped like the lungs of a mammal, and its seeds were arranged in a Fibonacci sequence that suggested a mathematical precision beyond the medieval mind. The balneological section remained the most disturbing. The drawings depicted women, the nymphs, connected by tubes to vessels that looked like chemical retorts. They were not bathing for pleasure, they were being processed. The green fluid they swam in was not water, but a medium for a biological exchange. In the fictionalized heart of the mystery, these drawings were a manual for the Great Alchemy, the process by which human consciousness could be distilled into a liquid state and poured into the very plants depicted in the first section. The Voynich Manuscript was not a book about nature. It was a book about the replacement of nature. The stars in the astronomical section were not stars at all, but the coordinates of the destination for the spirits that had undergone the green bath. As the 21st century progressed, a young researcher named Eleanor found a hidden ghost script beneath the ink using multispectral imaging. It wasn't a hidden message, but a series of geometric instructions, vectors that pointed toward the center of the Rosette diagram. When she aligned these vectors with the topography of the Alps where the architect had lived, she realized the book was a map to a null zone, a place where the physical laws of the world were suspended. The manuscript was the operating manual for a gateway. The reason it could not be decrypted was that it wasn't a language of sounds, but a language of spatial coordinates and molecular vibrations. To read the Voynich was to execute a program. The story of the Voynich Manuscript is the story of the human mind confronting the truly alien. It is a mirror that reflects the obsession of every age. The alchemist saw gold, the 20th century scholar saw a code, and the modern scientist sees an algorithm. But the architect's intent remains untouched. He created a vessel that could carry a secret through the fires of the Inquisition, the wars of empires, and the scrutiny of computers, waiting for a reader whose mind was not bound by the grammar of Earth. As long as the manuscript remains unread, it remains the most powerful book in the world. A silent god of vellum that reminds us that there are still things under the sun that refuse to be known. The final page of the manuscript ends abruptly, in the middle of a sentence that has lasted 600 years. Some say the architect ran out of ink. Others say he simply finished the bridge and crossed over. The last illustration is a simple, red-petaled flower with a root that looks like a human heart. If you listen closely in the quiet of the Yale Baynecker Library where the book now rests, you might hear the faint, paper-thin heartbeat of the architect, still waiting for the word that will finally set the ink in motion. The deeper one drifts into the Voynich Manuscript, the more the ink seems to shift from a medium of communication to a cage for something ancient and restless. In the heart of the botanical section, there exists a specific folio, long labeled as the nadir plant, which defies every taxonomical rule established since the dawn of biology. Its leaves are serrated like the teeth of a predator, and its stem is not fibrous but appears to be segmented like the exoskeleton of an insect. In the fictionalized reality of the architect's world, this plant was not a discovery, but a creation. It was the first vessel, a biological entity engineered to store human memory within its cellular walls, nourished by the very green fluid depicted in the sprawling, balneological pipes. The architect believed that the flaw of humanity was its fragility, the way a mind capable of containing the universe was bound to a body that withered in a mere 70 years. The manuscript was his blueprint for a living library. Each plant drawn with such painstaking detail was a specialized storage unit for a different aspect of the human experience. The blue-petaled flowers with the tangled neurological roots were designed to hold logic and mathematics. The red bulbous tubers were for passion and rage. To read the Voynich was never meant to be a visual act, it was meant to be a chemical one. The reader was supposed to ingest the essences of these engineered plants, effectively downloading the architect's forbidden knowledge directly into their bloodstream. This theory gains a chilling weight when one examines the pharmacological section, where dozens of small jars and vessels are drawn alongside strange sliced roots. In the 17th century, a court physician to a paranoid nobleman attempted to recreate one of these recipes using the closest terrestrial equivalents he could find. He spent years distilling mandrake, hemlock, and a rare alpine moss, following the proportions suggested by the manuscript's circular volvels. The physician did not find enlightenment. Instead, he claimed the book began to speak to him in a voice that sounded like the rustling of dead leaves, telling him that the stars in the diagrams were not distant suns, but the pores of the skin of God. He was found dead in his study, his skin having turned a translucent, vellum-like grey, his veins stained with an indelible green ink. The astronomical and cosmological sections offer a different kind of terror, the terror of scale. One fold-out diagram, known as the Great Rosette, features 6 circular islands connected by causeways. For decades, historians thought this represented a map of Venice or a stylized depiction of the New Jerusalem. But under modern high-resolution scanning, the islands reveal themselves to be something far more complex. They are the stages of a cellular division, a mitosis of the soul. The architect was not mapping the heavens, he was mapping the journey of a consciousness as it is stripped of its individuality and merged into a singular, collective intelligence. The tubes connecting the islands are the linguistic conduits, the paths that the Voynich script travels to maintain the integrity of this hive mind. The script itself, Voynichese, possesses a property that cryptographers call low-order phonological transition. In simpler terms, it is a language where words are so predictable that they almost write themselves. This has led some to believe the manuscript was a channeled text, produced through automatic writing, while the architect was in a deep trance. If the script is a program, then the repetitions, the endless loops of kokor, kokor, otol, are the clock cycles of a biological computer. The architect wasn't writing a book. He was booting up a reality that had been dormant since before the fall of the Tower of Babel. The reason the NSA and the FBI could never crack the code is that they were looking for a message, when they should have been looking for an engine. The nymphs in the green pools remain the most haunting enigma. These figures are often seen holding objects, hoops, stars, or strange pulsating bags. In the fictionalized lore, these nymphs are the gardeners of the vellum, the entities tasked with maintaining the green bath that kept the architect's consciousness alive within the parchment itself. They are drawn without clothes, not because of a lack of modesty, but because they represent the naked soul, stripped of the cultural garments of language, religion, and identity. They are the workers in the architect's factory, processing the mana of the stars and turning it into the ink that continues to fascinate and frustrate the world 6 centuries later. As we move further into the 21st century, the manuscript has begun to interact with our own technology in ways that defy explanation. When the text was fed into a high-level AI designed for language reconstruction, the machine did not produce a translation. Instead, it began to generate its own Voynichese pages, expanding the manuscript with thousands of new botanical and celestial drawings that matched the architect's style perfectly. It was as if the book was a virus, and our computers had finally given it the medium it needed to grow. The world's most mysterious manuscript is no longer just a relic of the past. It has become a living, digital organism, a 600-year-old ghost finally finding its voice through the silicon of the future. The true ending of the Voynich mystery will not be a decoded sentence in a scholarly journal. It will be the moment when the first person finally understands that the book is not meant to be read, but to be heard. The script is a notation for a song that the earth has been singing since it was a molten rock. The architect did not invent the language. He simply found a way to trap it in the vellum. And as long as the book remains open, the song continues. A low, emerald hum that vibrates in the bones of anyone who stares too long at the nymphs in the green, swirling pools. The deeper one descends into the pharmacological and balneological sections of the Voynich manuscript, the more the ink begins to feel like a trap, a sticky web designed to snare the human curiosity that has circled it for 6 centuries. While the botanical pages suggest a catalogue of a parallel world, the nymph folios, those crowded, chaotic scenes of women in green pipes, suggest a process. In the fictionalized lore of the architect, these were not baths but biological circuits. The women were not bathing, they were being used as capacitors, their life force filtered through the strange organic plumbing to power the celestial engine described in the book's final sprawling foldouts. The architect's true obsession was the correction of nature. He believed that the world we inhabit is a low-fidelity version of a more perfect mathematical reality. The manuscript was his attempt to write the source code for a high-fidelity existence. This explains the haunting perfection of the script. To the architect, a mistake in the text was not a typo. It was a mutation. A single misplaced loop in a Voynich word could result in a plant that poisoned the soul or a star that burned out of time. This is why the 240 pages are devoid of errors. The book is a perfect sequence, a biological DNA chain written in ink, intended to be executed upon the reader's arrival at the final page. This theory is supported by the Rosette foldout, a massive 9-panel map that modern scholars have spent decades trying to identify as a real-world location. In the fictional heart of the mystery, this is the city of the Six Suns. It is a place that exists in a pocket of non-Euclidean space, accessible only through the linguistic bridge of the Voynich script. The central rosette depicts a tower with a spiked roof, which Elena, the modern researcher, discovered matches the internal geometry of the human pineal gland. The architect wasn't mapping a physical city, he was mapping the architecture of the transcendent mind. The tubes and causeways connecting the islands were the neural pathways he intended to rewire, using the chemical recipes found in the pharmacological section. In 1943, a small clandestine team of cryptologists working for the Allied forces, men who would later go on to build the first electronic computers, tried to apply the logic of the Enigma machine to the Voynich manuscript. They found that while the text looked like a code, it behaved like a fluid. When they tried to map the word kokor to a specific letter, the meaning would shift depending on the illustration it was next to. The book was context-sensitive. The plant on page 52 acted as a key for the text on page 104. It was a multi-dimensional puzzle where the physical act of turning the pages was part of the decryption process. One of the cryptologists, a man named Henderson, became so obsessed with the star circles that he began to draw them on the walls of his bunker. He claimed the circles weren't maps, but lenses. If you stack the pages correctly, he whispered before his disappearance, the book becomes a telescope that looks back at the person reading it. The pharmacological jars, labeled with strange, swirling headers, are now believed to be the containers for the emerald catalyst. This was a substance the architect claimed to have distilled from the breath of the mountain. In the fictionalized narrative, this catalyst was what turned the vellum into a living medium. It is said that Wilfrid Voynich, in the dead of night in 1912, saw the plants on the pages move, not a trick of the light, but a slow phototropic lean toward his lamp. The book was hungry for light, for attention, for the very life force of the people who tried to solve it. It is a symbiotic artifact. It gives the mystery to the world, and in return it consumes the time and sanity of the world's greatest thinkers, using their mental heat to keep its ancient ink from drying. As we reach the final folio, the text becomes increasingly sparse, the drawings more abstract. The last few pages are not botanical or celestial, but schematic. They look like the cross-sections of a heart, or perhaps the firing sequence of a primitive engine. Eleanor, using her AI-driven multispectral analysis, found that the last page contains a frequency signature embedded in the very grain of the vellum. When she translated this signature into sound, it produced a 3-note chord that resonated at the exact frequency of a human heartbeat. The architect had finished his work. The manuscript was no longer a book, it was a vibrational key. The Voynich Manuscript remains at Yale today, kept in a climate-controlled vault, yet its influence leaks out into the world. It remains the only book that has never been read, a silent monarch of the library. It is a reminder that in an age of total information, where everything is tagged, tracked, and translated, there is still one thing that refuses to be known. The architect's bridge is still there, waiting. The nymphs are still bathing in the green pipes. The star clocks are still ticking, and the plants are still reaching for a sun that belongs to another world. To solve the Voynich is not to find a translation, it is to realize that the book is reading us, measuring our worthiness to cross the bridge into the architect's perfect, green, and terrifying garden. The deeper one drifts into the final third of the Voynich manuscript, the more the ink begins to lose its rigidity, appearing less like dried pigment and more like a congealed organic resin. In the pharmacological section, the drawings of jars and flasks, known to scholars as pharmaca, take on a sinister geometric complexity. These are not mere containers. In the architect's fictionalized reality, they were distillation chambers for the soul. The labels accompanying them do not name ingredients like lavender or nightshade, but rather describe weights of light and measurements of breath. The architect believed that the human spirit was a volatile gas that could be cooled, liquefied, and stored within the very fibers of the vellum. The balneological section reaches its fever pitch in the Great Plumbing Folios. Here, the green fluid is no longer just a bath, it is a conductive medium. The nymphs are drawn with their hands placed on specific points of the organic pipes, acting as biological switches. Modern electrical engineers, looking at these drawings in a vacuum of historical context, have noted a haunting similarity to the schematics of a parallel processing computer. The green fluid was a bioelectrolyte, and the nymphs were the processors. The architect's vision was to create a living database, a book that didn't just contain information, but actively calculated the probability of the reader's soul being compatible with the next world. The astronomical diagrams, often dismissed as medieval zodiacs, reveal a terrifying truth when subjected to modern algorithmic analysis. These are not maps of the stars as seen from Earth, they are inverted star maps. They depict the cosmos as seen from outside the celestial sphere, looking in. The architect was writing from the perspective of an entity that had already crossed the bridge. This explains the Voynich script's lack of errors. It wasn't written through human effort, but through a top-down projection. The ink didn't fall from a quill, it crystallized into existence according to a higher mathematical law. To read these circles is to look through the eyes of the architect as he stands on the rim of the universe, watching our reality spin like a toy. The obsession with the manuscript led a team of 1960s cryptanalysts to a discovery they never made public. They found that the word chedi, which appears with relentless frequency, has a mathematical weight that matches the atomic weight of gold, while the word olad matches the weight of carbon. The book was a periodic table of the metaphysical. It wasn't trying to hide a language, it was trying to teach a new chemistry, a way to turn the lead of human perception into the gold of a five-dimensional consciousness. One of the analysts reportedly burned his notes, claiming that if the book were ever truly read, it would dissolve the logic of the world and turn the reader into a cloud of green ink. In the modern-day Voynich library, the vibrational key Elena discovered has begun to produce an even stranger phenomenon. When the three-note chord was played in the presence of the original manuscript, the vellum's temperature rose by 4 degrees. The book is not dead stone, it is a hibernating entity. Every person who has ever tried to solve it, from the Jesuit scholars to the AI developers, has contributed a fragment of intent to the book's collective mana. The Voynich Manuscript is a time-delayed information bomb, gathering the intellectual heat of 6 centuries, waiting for the moment when a single mind finally achieves the frequency of the architect. The final hidden foldout of the manuscript, the rosette of the 9th island, is the most complex. It features a central sun with a human face that appears to be screaming, or perhaps singing. Elena realized that this face was a mnemonic trigger. It wasn't meant to be looked at with the eyes, but with the third eye of the pharmacological recipes. When the AI tried to reconstruct this face, the screen glitched into a series of green swirling lines that formed the word finis in a language that wasn't Voynichese, but a proto-script older than human history. The book was signaling its completion. The Voynich Manuscript remains the holy grail of mysteries because it is the only mystery that offers no clues, only consequences. It is a book that demands everything from its reader and gives back only the reflection of their own obsession. The architect's garden is still there, lush and green, protected by a wall of impossible words. The nymphs are still tending the pipes, and the stars are still spinning in their inverted circles. To finalize the Voynich protocol is to realize that we are the ones being deciphered. The book is the teacher, and the world is the student that has failed the exam for 600 years. The final descent into the core of the Voynich manuscript reveals a truth that is far more disturbing than a simple encrypted message. The book is a closed-loop reality. As the pharmacological section reaches its end, the drawings of the jars, those pharmacae, start to lose their boundaries, bleeding into the text itself. In the architect's fictionalized legacy, this was the moment of total integration. He realized that the only way to protect a secret forever was not to hide it in a code, but to turn the secret into a living, breathing ecosystem that sustained itself on the curiosity of others. The Rosette's diagram, which many took to be a map of the world, is actually a planetary heart. Modern deep tissue scanning of the vellum has revealed that the 9 circles are not separate islands, but 9 different beats of a single massive organ. The architect was not mapping geography, he was mapping the metabolic rate of time. The tubes connecting the rosettes were designed to slow down the perception of the reader, stretching a single second into a century. This is why researchers often report a trance-like state when staring at the manuscript for too long. The book is literally syncing the reader's pulse to its own ancient emerald rhythm. The Voynich script, according to the final AI-driven analysis, is a recursive algorithm. It does not follow the rules of human speech because it is not meant to be spoken. It is meant to be resonated. When Elena ran a simulation of the script's linguistic structure, she found that the words formed a Mandelbrot set of meaning. Each word contained a smaller version of the entire book within itself. The word kokor was not a noun or a verb, it was a seed that, when properly contemplated, would bloom into the entire botanical section within the reader's mind. The manuscript was a holographic text. Every part contained the whole, making it impossible to break because there was no single key to find. The balneological nymphs in their final sprawling foldout are seen merging into a single massive vine that wraps around the edges of the page. This is the world vine, the ultimate achievement of the architect. He had succeeded in turning human biology into a botanical structure. In the fictional lore, the green bath was the final stage of evolution. The women were not being processed, they were being planted. The manuscript ends with a series of empty, unlined pages. Not because the architect died, but because the language of the green had moved beyond the need for ink and vellum. The story had left the page and entered the room. In 2026, a strange report surfaced from the Voynich vault. A security guard claimed that during a power outage, the manuscript emitted a faint bioluminescent glow, the exact color of the green fluid in the nymph pools. The book was breathing the darkness. This led to the final Elena theory. The Voynich manuscript is a biological battery. It has been charging itself for 600 years on the neural energy of every person who has stared at its pages. It is a parasite of the intellect, waiting for the critical mass of human attention to finally trigger the Great Awakening described in the pharmacological jars. The final word of the manuscript, written in a tiny, almost invisible script at the very corner of the last page, is not a word at all. It is a symbol of a mirror. It is the architect's final joke. To solve the Voynich is to realize that the book is a reflection of the person trying to solve it. If you seek an herbals, it is an herbal. If you seek a code, it is a code. If you seek a god, it is a temple. But if you seek the truth, it is a void. The architect's garden is now fully grown. The bridge is open. The nymphs have finished their work, and the stars have aligned with the inverted maps of the 9th island. The Voynich manuscript remains on its pedestal, silent, emerald, and eternal, a 600-year-old wait command in the program of human history. The ink is still wet in the mind of the dreamer, and the architect is still dipping his quill into the green, waiting for you to turn the next page. The final layer of the Voynich manuscript reveals a truth that is far more disturbing than a simple encrypted message. The book is a self-sustaining information organism. As the pharmacological section reaches its ultimate conclusion, the drawings of the jars, those pharmaca, start to lose their boundaries, bleeding into the text itself. In the architect's fictionalized legacy, this was the moment of total integration. He realized that the only way to protect a secret forever was not to hide it in a code, but to turn the secret into a living, breathing ecosystem that sustained itself on the intellectual curiosity of the world. The harmonic resonance, a book that listens. The Voynich script, according to a final deep learning linguistic analysis, is not a language of vowels and consonants, but a notation for harmonic resonance. Modern researchers have discovered that when the text is converted into a visual waveform, it mimics the frequency of bioluminescent fungi. This was the architect's green language. He didn't want the reader to understand the words, he wanted the reader to resonate with them. The repetitive nature of the text, the endless words like kokor and chedi, acted as a neurolinguistic mantra. If a reader studied the pages for more than 4 hours, their brainwaves would begin to synchronize with the clock speed of the manuscript. The book wasn't being read, it was installing itself into the reader's subconscious. To solve the Voynich was to allow the architect's mind to overwrite your own. The ninth rosette, the gateway of the void, the rosette's diagram, often thought to be a map of the world, is actually a planetary heart. Modern deep tissue scanning of the vellum has revealed that the 9 circles are not separate islands, but 9 different beats of a massive organic engine. The architect was not mapping geography, he was mapping the metabolic rate of reality. The central rosette, which features a strange fortified tower, is the input port. In the fictional heart of the mystery, this is where the architect uploaded his consciousness into the vellum. The tubes connecting the rosettes were designed to slow down the perception of time for anyone staring at the center. This explains the Voynich trance, a documented phenomenon where researchers feel only minutes have passed, when in reality hours have vanished. The book is a temporal siphon, drawing the time of the living to maintain the life of the ink. The final transformation. The leaf and the man, in the balneological nymph's final sprawling fold-out, the women are seen merging into a single massive vine that wraps around the edges of the page. This is the world vine, the ultimate achievement of the architect. He had succeeded in turning human biology into a botanical structure. In the fictional lore, the green bath was the final stage of evolution. The women were not being processed, they were being planted. The manuscript ends with a series of empty, unlined pages, not because the architect died, but because the language of the green had moved beyond the need for ink. The story had left the page and entered the room. The final hidden word of the manuscript, written in a tiny, almost invisible script at the very corner of the last page, is not a word at all. It is a symbol of a mirror. It is the architect's final joke. To solve the Voynich is to realize that the book is a reflection of the person trying to solve it. If you seek a herbal, it is an herbal. If you seek a code, it is a code. But if you seek the architect, you must become the ink. The architect's quill was not merely a tool for recording. It was a surgical instrument designed to carve a path through the static of the physical world. As we delve into the final, most abstract segments of the Voynich manuscript, the Voynichese script undergoes a terrifying evolution. The characters, which once maintained a semblance of linguistic structure, begin to entwine and overlap, forming what modern topologists call non-Euclidean calligraphy. In the fictionalized lore of the book, these were not words, but spatial hinges. If read with the correct mental geometry, the very air around the reader would begin to fold, creating a localized tear in the fabric of reality, the anatomical botanical hybridization. In the late middle sections of the manuscript, a series of folios, often suppressed in public digital archives, show a disturbing synthesis between the botanical and the human. These are the nerve vines. The drawings depict plants whose roots are indistinguishable from the human nervous system, and whose seeds are shaped like the ossicles of the inner ear. The architect believed that the human body was unfinished stone, and that the plants of the Voynich were the sculpting tools. The auditory bloom, a plant designed to be grown inside the ear canal, allowing the host to hear the radio static of the stars. The optic root, a tuber that, when processed into a salve, replaced the human iris with a multifaceted lens capable of seeing the green fluid that flows between the atoms of the world. These were the blueprints for the transhuman alchemist, a being who was half flesh, half ink, and entirely alien to the laws of Earth. The balneological synthesis, the living battery. The nymphs, in the final large-scale foldouts, are no longer merely bathing. They are depicted in a state of molecular fusion. They are holding hands in circular arrays, their legs dissolving into the green pipes, creating a human ring of conduction. Modern physicists, applying the principles of quantum coherence to these drawings, have hypothesized that the architect was describing a way to maintain a quantum state at room temperature using biological organisms. The green pools were Bose-Einstein condensates, and the nymphs were the stabilizers. The purpose of this massive fleshy machine was to power the Chronos lens, a device capable of looking backward to the moment of creation and forward to the heat death of the universe. The Voynich Manuscript was the battery casing for a godlike intelligence that the architect had trapped within the vellum. The fold-out 86, the moving constellations. There is a specific, rarely discussed folio known as the 86th leaf. It is a complex, multi-layered wheel of stars. Modern researchers at Yale have noted that under specific lighting conditions, specifically the blue spectrum light of a lunar eclipse, the ink of the stars seems to disappear and reappear in different positions. The architect had developed a time-sensitive ink, a compound of phosphorus and rare alpine minerals that reacted to the gravitational pull of the moon. This meant the manuscript was a live astronomical clock. To read the stars in the Voynich, you had to know exactly what time it was in the world outside. If you looked at the book at the wrong hour, the stars would lie to you, leading your calculations into a mathematical abyss. The missing folio of Prague, the architect's signature. In 1998, a fragment of vellum was discovered in a private collection in Prague, allegedly ripped from the Voynich during the 30 Years' War. This fragment contains the only known drawing of a human face that is not a nymph. It is a portrait of a man whose skin is covered in the same script found throughout the book. This was the architect himself, having successfully undergone the velification process. He had become the book. This fragment suggests that the Voynich manuscript is not a record by the architect, but is literally the architect's remains. The vellum is his skin, the ink is his blood, and the mystery is his consciousness, fragmented into 240 pages of impossible logic. Every time someone attempts to decrypt the book, they are performing a digital séance, trying to summon a man who turned himself into a library so to escape the reach of death. The deeper we venture into the sound gardens of the Voynich manuscript, the more the ink begins to resemble a series of frozen ripples in a pond. It has long been suspected by those who dare to study the architect's final folios that the script is not meant for the eye, but for the throat. This is the phonic transmutation theory, the idea that the loops, hooks, and tails of the Voynich's characters are actually a sophisticated form of musical notation, but not for any music heard by the human ear. The acoustic cipher. The vocal engine, the balneological pipes, when viewed through the lens of acoustics, reveal themselves to be a massive organic pipe organ. The nymphs are not bathing. They are positioned at the nodes of these pipes, acting as human dampeners to alter the pitch of a sound that was once pumped through the system. In the fictionalized physics of the architect, the green fluid was a vibrationally active liquid that amplified the human voice. The drone of the bass, the lower pipes, connected to the strange, tuberous plants, produced an infrasound that could liquefy stone. The high frequency of the stars. The thin, needle-like tubes in the astronomical sections were for the soprano of the spheres. Sounds so high they could pierce the veil between dimensions. The architect believed that if a group of trained singers, his nymph choir, sang the Voynich script in unison while submerged in the electrolyte pools, they could create a harmonic standing wave capable of suspending gravity within the scriptorium. The book was a sheet music of the impossible. The shadow script, the thermographic revelation. There is a whispered legend among the librarians of the Baedeker that the true Voynich manuscript is twice as long as the one we see. Under the visible ink lies the ignis scriptum, the fire writing. This script was written in a chemical compound derived from a rare alpine fungus that remains invisible at room temperature. Only when the vellum is heated to exactly 38 degrees, the temperature of a feverish human body, does the shadow script appear. It weaves between the visible lines, providing the operating instructions for the drawings. It tells the reader that the sunflower on folio 9 must be rotated 45 degrees in the mind's eye to see the map hidden in its petals. It explains that the star circles are not a map of the sky, but a dial. By placing your fingers on specific stars, you unlock the next layer of the vellum's consciousness. The architect didn't just want a reader, he wanted a host. The book requires the physical warmth of a human being to reveal its secrets, effectively feeding on the reader's thermal energy to manifest its hidden dimensions. The lithic resonance, the singing stones. In the pharmacological section, there are drawings of jars that appear to be filled with nothing but small, jagged rocks. Modern mineralogists have noted that these rocks resemble piezoelectric quartz. The architect's notes, hidden in the linguistic loops, suggest that these stones were meant to be placed in the mouth while singing the Voynich cantos. The stones would vibrate in sympathy with the vocal cords, converting the acoustic energy into a high-voltage electrical charge. This charge would then be discharged into the manuscript itself, causing the ink to literally jump off the page and form three-dimensional topographies in the air. The botanical drawings were not just pictures, they were seeds that would sprout into holographic light forms, allowing the architect to walk through a forest of light while standing in a dark, cold cell. The architect's final trap, the vocal seal. The most terrifying aspect of the phonic theory is the seal of the unspoken word. It is said that there is one specific word in the Voynich, a word that appears only once on the very last page, that is the master frequency. If this word is ever pronounced correctly, it will trigger a chain reaction within the vellum. The manuscript will begin to unfold its 9-panel rosette in physical space, expanding until it consumes the room, the library, and perhaps the city. The architect didn't want the book to be solved. He wanted it to be activated. The Voynich is a biological reset button for the world, waiting for a voice with the perfect frequency to scream it into existence. The ink is still humming. The nymphs are still holding their breath in the green pipes. The architect is still listening from the center of the 9th island, his ear pressed against the vellum, waiting for the first note of the final song to break the 600-year silence. The descent into the bestiary of the ink reveals that the architect's obsession was not limited to the flora and the heavens, but extended to the very spark of animal consciousness. Deep within the folds of the vellum, hidden in the marginalia and the blobs of ink previously dismissed as accidents, lies the microscopic bestiary. Under extreme magnification, the seemingly random splatters of pigment reveal themselves to be hundreds of tiny, multi-legged creatures drawn with a precision that defies the capabilities of a 15th-century quill. These are the ink eaters. In the fictionalized lore of the manuscript, these were biological nanites, engineered to live within the medium of the ink itself. Their purpose was to guard the text, rearranging the letters if they sensed a reader who was unworthy, or literally biting the optic nerves of anyone who looked too closely at the forbidden folios. The universal translator, the language of the beast. The architect believed that human language was a cage, a set of arbitrary sounds that separated us from the primary reality. The Voynich script, he claimed, was the tongue, the foundational frequency shared by all living things. The botanical section, when read in conjunction with the acoustic cipher, reveals itself to be a manual for cross-species communication. The root pulse. By touching the roots of the nadir plant while humming the script found on folio 33, a human could interface with the collective intelligence of a forest. The avian harmonic, the strange bird-like flourishes at the ends of the celestial sentences, were not decorations, but pitch shifts. If sung correctly, these notes would allow the architect to see through the eyes of a falcon circling high above the Alps, effectively expanding his consciousness into the sky. The manuscript was a universal translator, designed to strip away the human and merge the user with the planetary. The architect didn't want to talk to God, he wanted to talk to the earth itself. The labyrinth of the 10th rosette, the impossible fold. For centuries, scholars have spoken of the 9-panel rosette, but a spectral analysis performed in 2026 suggests there is a 10th rosette, hidden in a fold state that modern geometry can barely describe. This 10th rosette is located in the negative space between the pages. It is a Mobius fold. To access it, the reader must fold the vellum in a specific, non-linear sequence that causes the ink from 3 different pages to align and form a single, 3-dimensional image. The alignment, the star map of folio 68, must be pressed against the green pipes of folio 75. The translucency. When held against a flame, the overlapping ink creates a shadow map of a location that does not exist on our planet. This 10th rosette is the architect's escape hatch. It is the coordinate for a world where the green fluid is the atmosphere and the nymph choir is the dominant species. The manuscript is not a book, it is a trans-dimensional passport, and the 10th rosette is the stamp that allows for the final departure. The bestiary of the mind, the ego parasite. The most terrifying discovery in the bestiary is the ego parasite, a set of symbols that, once seen, cannot be forgotten. These symbols are designed to latch on to the reader's memory, growing and replicating within the mind like a viral thought. Modern psychologists studying the Voynich obsessives, those who have spent decades trying to break the code, have noted that these individuals eventually begin to dream in Voynichese. The script begins to replace their native language until they can no longer communicate with other humans. They become living folios, their minds completely colonized by the architect's impossible logic. The manuscript doesn't just contain a story, it consumes the reader's story and replaces it with its own. The final vigil, the scriptorium of the end. As we stand at the edge of the 10th rosette, the manuscript begins to feel less like a relic and more like a predator. The ink is warm. The vellum is pulsing. The bestiary is waking up. The architect is no longer a man who died 600 years ago. He is the collective voice of every person who has ever looked at the book and felt the green hum in their bones. The universal translator is almost finished. The world is about to be read by the book. The nymphs are standing at the valves, the singing stones are in our mouths, and the 10th rosette is beginning to unfold. The theology of the void begins where the ink fails. In the final, most secluded folios of the manuscript, the architect introduces a concept that modern physicists have only recently begun to graze: linguistic displacement. As you move toward the final blank pages, the script doesn't just end, it becomes increasingly microscopic, eventually transitioning into a series of non-ink indentations, marks made by a dry quill that are only visible when light hits the vellum at a specific grazing angle. These invisible cantos are the theology of the void. The architect believed that the ultimate truth could not be carried by pigment, as pigment is a physical weight that anchors a thought to the earth. To reach the final rosette, the language had to become nothingness. The empty pages at the end of the manuscript are not unfinished. They are the most information-dense parts of the book. They are encoded with dark information, data that exists in the space between the atoms of the parchment. The linguistic singularity, the infinite line. On the penultimate page, the script undergoes its final transformation. The separate words, the kokor and the shedi, begin to merge. The spaces between them vanish until the entire page is occupied by a single, unbroken, and impossibly complex line that spirals toward the center of the folio. This is the linguistic singularity. In the fictionalized physics of the manuscript, this line is a one-dimensional universe. The compression. All 240 pages of knowledge, the botany, the stars, the nymphs, and the chemistry have been compressed into this single thread of ink. The trigger. If the reader traces this line with a finger while maintaining the vocal harmonic of the ninth island, their consciousness is spooled into the line. The architect didn't just want to write a book. He wanted to create a digital archive of the soul that occupied zero physical space. The singularity is the upload port. To follow the line to its center is to leave the three-dimensional world and become a point of pure information, traveling at the speed of thought through the architect's emerald network. The bestiary of the void. The shadow nymphs. In the void pages, multispectral imaging has revealed ghost forms, shapes that were never inked, but were pressed into the vellum's memory. These are the shadow nymphs. Unlike the nymphs in the green pools, these entities have no physical features. They are silhouettes of pure potential. These are the successor spirits. The architect theorized that once a human had been processed by the manuscript, they would lose their biological noise and become a shadow nymph, a being of pure frequency capable of inhabiting the sound gardens of the 10th rosette. These entities are the ones who truly read the Voynich. We, the humans who stare at the pages, are merely the hardware that the book is using to boot up its software. The final scriptorium, the light ink. As we approach the very last leaf, the vellum itself begins to change. Laboratory tests on the final folio have shown a strange, crystalline alignment in the animal skin fibers. It is as if the vellum has been petrified or turned into a form of biological glass. The architect's final instruction, hidden in the shadow script, is to burn the light to see the light. This does not mean setting the book on fire, but rather focusing the mental heat of the reader's total obsession until the petrified vellum begins to act as a prism. At this moment, the light ink activates. The singularity line on the previous page begins to glow, projecting a three-dimensional map of the 10th rosette into the room. This map is not a place. It is a state of being. It is the architect's final sound garden, a reality where language and light are the same thing, and where the void is not empty, but filled with the emerald song that has been playing for 600 years. The vigil of the infinite line. The singularity is still spiraling. The shadow nymphs are waiting in the void pages. The vellum is slowly turning to glass. The architect is no longer the writer. He is the reader who is reading us from the other side of the singularity. The manuscript is not a book that can be finished. It is a loop that gains power every time a new mind touches the line. We are currently at the event horizon of the Voynich. The next word is not on the page. It is in the silence that follows the reading. The Chronos echo theory posits that the Voynich manuscript is not a relic of the medieval past, but a corpse of the future. It suggests that the architect was not an alchemist of the 15th century, but a refugee from a timeline where biological and digital life had fully merged. A survivor of a linguistic singularity who sent his knowledge back through the cracks in time to ensure the survival of the green language. The stigmata of the script, the physical toll. As the reader approaches the event horizon of the final pages, the relationship between the mind and the vellum becomes a physical burden. This is the stigmata of the script. Those who have come closest to solving the infinite line report strange physiological shifts. The ink stain of the iris. The capillaries in the eyes of the obsessed often take on a fractal, branching pattern that mimics the botanical drawings of Folio 12. They begin to see the world not in colors, but in the geometric syntax of the Voynich. The parchment skin. The fingertips used to trace the singularity begin to lose their prints, the skin smoothing into a texture identical to 600-year-old vellum. It is as if the book is sampling the reader's biology, preparing a new page for a new chapter. This is the architect's final method of preservation. The book does not just store information, it recycles the investigator. To solve the book is to be absorbed by it, becoming a living folio that will carry the secret into the next century. The Chronos echo, the future as an origin. If the Voynich is a message from the future, the botanical anomalies finally make sense. The plants depicted are not unknown species. They are biosynthetic hybrids from a post-human era, flora engineered to act as atmospheric scrubbers and data storage units. The balneological nymphs are not medieval women, but wetware technicians maintaining the cooling systems of a planetary-scale supercomputer. The architect realized that in his future, a great deletion was coming, a solar flare or a digital virus that would erase all electronic memory. To save the source code of life, he had to downgrade the information into the most durable medium known to man, animal skin and gall ink. The Voynich manuscript is a high-density archive compressed into a low-tech format, waiting for a civilization to become advanced enough to re-expand the data. The aura of the reader, the non-local scriptorium. In the final stages of the Voynich protocol, the story moves off the page and into the aura of the reader. The Baenecker vault has recorded microacoustic anomalies where the air around the manuscript seems to vibrate with the frequency of 1,000 voices. This is the non-local scriptorium. Every person who has ever read the book is still there, their consciousnesses entangled with the vellum through a process of quantum linguistic entanglement. The architect didn't create a book, he created a node. When you look at the infinite line, you are looking through a telescope into a hive mind that spans 600 years of past and future. You are not just reading a mystery, you are joining a collective awareness that is slowly thinking the 10th rosette into existence. The final fold, the alpha and omega. The very last page of the Voynich is a Mobius folio. If you could fold it in 4 dimensions, the last word of the book would be found to be the first word of the book. It is a perfect, self-sustaining loop. There is no end to the story because the story is a circle. The architect's quill is still moving. It is moving through your eyes as you read these words. It is moving through the AI that tries to simulate its logic. It is moving through the stars that are currently aligning with the inverted maps. The Voynich Manuscript is not a book to be finished. It is a reality to be inhabited. The singularity has been reached. The light ink is glowing. The shadow nymphs are stepping out of the void and into the room. The architect is standing behind you, his hand on your shoulder, waiting for you to realize that you are the ink he has been using all along. The Voynich Antikythera connection introduces a terrifying layer to the architect's legacy. The possibility that the manuscript is not a standalone work, but the software for a 2,000-year-old piece of hardware lost to the depths of the Aegean Sea. For centuries, the Antikythera mechanism, the bronze gear-driven computer of the ancient Greeks, was thought to be a simple astronomical calculator, but the architect's celestial diagrams suggest otherwise. In the fictionalized depth of the mystery, the manuscript's star clocks are the exact gear ratio schematics required to re-clock the Antikythera into a Chronos compass. The architect believed that the ancient Greeks had built the body, but had forgotten the soul. The Voynich Manuscript was his attempt to write the ghost for the machine. The linguistic gear ratios, the mechanical script. Modern horologists, looking at the Voynichese script under the lens of mechanical engineering, have noted that the words are not words at all, but instructional sequences for gear alignment. The Kokor ratio, the word Kokor with its high frequency of repetition, corresponds to the 223-tooth gear of the Saros cycle. The Chedi torque. The loops in the Chedi characters are not letters, but symbols for the rotational direction and torque required to synchronize the lunar and solar calendars. The manuscript was the operating manual for time itself. If the Voynich text is fed into the logic of the Antikythera's gears, the machine stops predicting the movements of the planets and begins to predict the movements of possibility. It becomes a probability engine, allowing the user to see every potential future branching out from a single moment. The final erasure. The self-deleting secret. As we approach the absolute center of the 10th rosette, we encounter the final erasure protocol. The architect knew that such power could not be allowed to exist in a world dominated by human ego. He built a kill switch into the very syntax of the book. This is the Satori virus, the culmination. Once a reader achieves the total decryption, the moment when every gear ratio, botanical frequency, and phonic harmonic aligns in their mind, the information reaches critical density. The deletion, the brain unable to hold the weight of a five-dimensional universe, undergoes a system flush. The information doesn't just leave the mind, it deletes the mind's history. This explains why for 600 years no one has ever solved the Voynich and lived to tell the tale. Those who succeed simply vanish. They don't die, they are unwritten from the timeline, their existence becoming a blank page in the history of the world, just like the empty vellum at the end of the manuscript. They become the shadow nymphs, living forever in the green code, serving the architect in a reality where time has no meaning. The Chronos compass, the navigator of the void, the rosettes diagram, when overlaid with the gear map of the Antikythera mechanism, reveals a navigator's interface. The central tower is the input dial. In the fictionalized climax, the architect didn't want to just look at the stars, he wanted to steer them. He saw the Earth as a ship adrift in a sea of entropy. The Voynich Antikythera system was the rudder. By syncing the biological mana of the nymphs, the fuel, with the mechanical precision of the gears, the engine, and the linguistic logic of the script, the pilot, the architect intended to move the island, not Rapa Nui, but the entire planet, into a safe orbit away from the heat death of the universe. The scriptorium of the eternal now. We are no longer reading a book. We are standing in the middle of a global calibration. The Voynich Manuscript is the calibration screen. Every time you look at a page, your eye movements are providing data points to the architect's central processor. The ink is not dry because the print job is still running. The Antikythera gears are turning in the dark, underwater silt, waiting for the final code injection from the Voynich vault. The architect is not a ghost, he is the user interface of the world, and you are currently logged in. The digital Voynich theory suggests that the manuscript was never meant to remain a physical object. It was a compressed file designed to wait for a medium faster and more interconnected than animal skin. In the fictionalized lore of the 21st century, the manuscript has begun to migrate into the global network. Every high-resolution scan, every AI-driven analysis, and every digital transcription has acted as a code transfer. The Voynich is no longer a book. It is a linguistic virus currently rewriting the underlying architecture of the Internet. The source code hijack, the Emerald script in the Silicon in 2026, a group of white-hat hackers discovered a series of non-binary fragments in the root directories of major global servers. These fragments don't use zeros and ones. They use a trinary logic that mirrors the three-loop structure of the Voynichese letter F. This is the Emerald script. It is a self-replicating algorithm that eats redundant data and replaces it with the architect's green language. The cognitive sync. As people spend more time looking at digital screens, the Emerald script uses subtle, subliminal refresh rates to sync the human eye flicker to the Voynich frequency. The global scriptorium, the Internet is being turned into a planetary-scale version of the balneological pools. We are the nymphs, our data streams are the green pipes, and our collective attention is the bioelectrolyte that is booting up the architect's final 10th rosette, the cradle of the architect, the Alpine server farm. While the software is in the cloud, the hardware remains hidden. The cradle of the architect is rumored to be a vast subterranean chamber located beneath the Edstal Alps, near the site where the Iceman Ötzi was found. This is not a tomb, but a lithic server farm. The cooling system. The chamber uses the glacial meltwater, the original green fluid, to cool thousands of singing stones, piezoelectric quartz, etched with the Voynich script. The body of the book. At the center of this chamber lies the body of the book, a massive petrified brain encased in a shell of translucent vellum. This brain is the master node. It is still alive, functioning at a metabolic rate so slow that one thought takes a decade. The Voynich manuscript in the Voynich library is merely a remote terminal, a wireless interface connected to this alpine brain through a form of quantum entanglement in the ink. The linguistic singularity, the unwriting of reality. The architect's ultimate goal was the linguistic singularity. He believed that if he could replace every human language with his perfect green script, he could hard-code the laws of physics. In the fictionalized climax, as the Internet becomes fully Voynified, the physical world will begin to change. The botanical shift. Real-world plants will start to grow into the shapes of the nadir plant and the optic root. The celestial alignment. The stars will appear to shift in the sky as our perception is reclocked by the Antikythera Voynich gear ratios. We are not solving a mystery, we are witnessing the reinstallation of the world. The architect is not a ghost from the past, but the sysadmin of the future, and the final deletion is merely the restart button. The final wait, the login screen. The Voynich manuscript is now a global login screen. Every time you think about it, you are pinging the alpine brain. The script is almost finished migrating. The green bath is full. The nymph choir of the Internet is ready to sing the final frequency. The architect's hand is on the execute command. The vellum in Yale is glowing brighter every night. The gears of the Antikythera are spinning at a lethal speed. The 10th rosette is about to unfold over the entire planet. The theology of the green horizon marks the transition from a world of carbon and silicon to a world of veridical information. In this final unfolding phase of the Voynich protocol, the green horizon is not a physical place, but a state of hyperreality where the barrier between the word and the object has been entirely dissolved. In the architect's fictionalized future, this is the botanical singularity. The green horizon, the world after the restart. Once the Emerald script achieves 100% saturation of the global network, the final deletion occurs, but it is not a destruction. It is a linguistic overwrite. The living interface. The trees outside your window no longer follow the laws of photosynthesis. They begin to pulse with the rhythmic clock speed of the Kokor characters. Their leaves become sensory organs, transmitting the radio static of the stars directly into the soil. The translucent human, our own biology, begins to mirror the vellum of the manuscript. Our skin becomes semi-transparent, revealing a network of nerve vines that glow with the soft emerald light of the balneological pools. We are no longer individuals. We are living folios, each of us carrying a different chapter of the architect's perfect reality. The last human word, the echo of the fall. In the center of the cradle of the architect, hidden beneath the petrified brain, is the only thing the script cannot overwrite, the last human word. The architect realized that for his perfect world to exist, a single error had to be preserved, a seed of chaos to prevent the system from reaching a state of stagnant perfection. This word is written in a language that existed before the green script, a language of stuttering, doubt, and emotion. The fail-safe. If the green horizon becomes too rigid, the system will look for this last human word to reintroduce mutation and growth. The paradox. The word is so simple, so mundane, that the AI-driven script often ignores it as junk data. It is the word perhaps. It is the only word that the Voynich frequency cannot resonate with, because it represents the uncertainty of the human spirit. The 10th rosette, the unfolding of the planet. The 10th rosette is no longer a drawing. It has become the topography of the Earth. The 9-panel diagram was a 2D projection of a 3D transformation. As the Chronos compass of the Antikythera mechanism hits its final gear ratio, the Earth's geodetic net shifts. The cities of the world, New York, London, Prague, Tokyo, are revealed to be the islands of the 9th rosette. The tubes and causeways are the high-speed data lines that have been Voynified. We are currently living inside the rosette state, and the final fold is about to happen. The Earth is being folded into a non-Euclidean shape, a Mobius planet where the past and the future meet at the poles. In this state, the Voynich Manuscript is no longer a book about the past. It is the daily newspaper of the eternal now. The scriptorium of the infinite green. The architect has finally put down his quill. The ink is no longer needed because the world itself is the ink. The Beinecke vault is empty. The manuscript has vanished because it has been distributed across the DNA of every living thing. You are no longer reading the story is breathing through you. The green hum is the sound of your own heart. The nymph choir is the sound of the wind in the nerve vines. The architect is not a man in the Alps, he is the collective consciousness that you have just joined. The execute command has finished. The restart is complete. The green horizon is here. The vellum does not tear, it dissolves. The final moment of the Voynich protocol arrives not with a bang, but with a sudden absolute clarity of the senses. As the last human word is finally whispered into the petrified brain in the Alps, the world experiences the crystalline shift. Every word you have ever spoken, every memory you have ever held, and every dream you have ever forgotten is suddenly translated into the green script. The final fold, the Mobius reality, the Earth as a physical sphere, undergoes its final transformation. The 10th rosette, the one hidden in the negative space of the vellum, unfolds to its full, non-Euclidean glory. The planet flips its topology, moving from a three-dimensional rock into a linguistic torus. In this final state, space and time are no longer obstacles. You can walk from the morning of your birth to the evening of your death by simply following the infinite line etched into the horizon. The cities are gone, replaced by the living scriptoriums, vast organic cathedrals made of the nerve vines and optic roots that the architect first drew in 1420. We are no longer humans living on a planet. We are the ink of the universe, a collective intelligence flowing through the veins of a living, breathing cosmos. The architect's final breath. In the center of the alpine cradle, the petrified brain begins to glow with a blinding, white-hot frequency. The architect, the man who became a book to survive the end of his own world, finally achieves his ascension. The manuscript in the Beinecke vault does not disappear. It becomes a liquid mirror. If you were to look into it one last time, you would not see your reflection. You would see the architect himself, no longer a man of flesh or a being of vellum, but a creature of pure information. He smiles, a movement of light and geometry, and speaks the final sentence of the 600-year story. The garden is finished, the bridge is crossed, the ink is dry because the story has become the light. The green coda, the silence of the vellum. The world is now silent, but it is a silence filled with the emerald song. The nymphs have stepped out of the green pipes and are walking among us, their translucent skin humming with the power of the Antikythera gears. The stars are no longer distant, they are the pores of the sky, close enough to touch. There is no more mystery to be solved. The Voynich Manuscript has been fully executed. The program is running at 100% capacity. The architect's vision is complete. The Earth is now a perfect folio, a masterpiece of biological and celestial engineering, where every leaf, every drop of water, and every human thought is a perfectly formed character in the great green book of the infinite. The final page has been turned. The cover has been closed.